Hey everyone, you're listening to the 805 Uncensored. We are a show on the Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network. This podcast covers a variety of topics from music to politics, news, philosophy, and more. There are no limits, which is why we're uncensored. So please follow us on your podcast and social media platforms of choice. This is part two of our panel number 18. We're going to be discussing Gaza, the climate crisis, ICE raids, and a number of other related topics. Today we have Shirin, and we also have Izzy, and Capy will be joining us shortly. So, pleasure to speak to you, ladies.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
You too. Thanks, Jordan.
So, first things first, I wanted to just bring up the latest news that I read in Gaza. This is via Al Jazeera. Sources in Gaza hospitals say 64 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli bombings today. At least 9 of them have been near Humanitarian Foundation, a Gaza Humanitarian Foundation (GHF) aid hub in the north of Rafah, including 3 children. At least 743 Palestinians have died in Israeli attacks at the notorious GHF distribution centers, as Israeli forces continue to target people waiting for food and hospitals struggle to cope with the wounded. So, I wanted to just start off by saying, in my view, Israel's fomenting fear over the WMD's discussion in Iran is no more than a smokescreen in an attempt to distract the world away from the ongoing genocide in Gaza, especially with some of Israel's most blatant killing of Palestinians occurring at the aid distribution centers. And I just wanted to get both of your thoughts on that.
I mean, I'll point out the similarities with what, you know, the regime in Iran does, the regime here does. It's that taking that attention, you know, that big moment, that big smokescreen, like you're saying, in the news, to then get away with what they want to. And Israel's doing that, the regime in Iran's doing that. We've seen that with all the bills they're passing over here. It's not shocking and it's absolutely horrifying, just like we'd see where they would leave out the bodies of the children so that their loved ones would come to get them and they would shoot them too. It's abhorrent, and it's sad to see that, people are so divided when we see similar things happening, you know, um, to children across the world, for example. But in at the food distribution centers, that is personally, I think, one of the most horrendous. I mean, it's just disgusting, disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of people have been comparing it to Squid Game, and it's so sad to see that Palestinians have to make videos even, and I mean, it's in some form, obviously, it's like wonderful to see that there's still spirit that they're willing to sarcastically joke about it to some degree, like, look what we have to do here, in order for their struggle to be seen. But yeah, it's just another one of their many tactics to eliminate as many people as possible, but as quietly as possible. I know people are talking about it like, oh, see, it's because of this group, it's because of that group, and the way, but it's still just all these different tactics, and it all adds up, and imagine how many aren't really being counted, and people still aren't really even eating. It's heinous to say the least. I really don't have too much to say else about that.
And that's just the food they're eating that's not, what is it, contaminated and absolutely, not edible. I can't imagine what portion of the food is actually being consumed.
Right, exactly. And you guys have probably read too that US contractors are now involved as well. They've been ordered to open fire at Palestinians seeking aid. So US involvement, not just indirectly via financial assistance and weapons assistance, but actually on the ground shooting at Palestinians as well. I also found it interesting that the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, or Haaretz, however you pronounce it, just recently put out a report talking about how the IDF is intentionally targeting Palestinians seeking aid, and they've been ordered to shoot to kill. And it's only since this reporting has come out that the IDF has now publicly stated, "Oh, we were wrong about this, and we're changing position." I have a
I'm
video.
not.
Sorry, go ahead, Sharon.
I was gonna say I'm not surprised that they would contract, killers, mercenaries, essentially.
Okay, I have a video that I want to show. Can you all see the screen? And so, hi, Cappy.
Can y'all hear me?
We can. Welcome to the
I
panel.
can't hear y'all. I can't hear y'all at all. Give me just a minute.
Okay, I will show this video now.
Well, let's talk to Pietro Stefanini about this. He's a tutor in politics at the University of Edinburgh and is joining us live from there. Thank you for your time. When humanitarian aid becomes a site of mass death, as we've seen with GHF, can we still call it humanitarian?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, what has been happening is a concerted effort to militarize and weaponize humanitarian aid. And we're seeing certainly something different from what the humanitarian organizations were previously doing. But there is this weaponization of aid distribution as a tool of genocide, which is done specifically to advance strategic war aims.
Right.
So, for instance,
what precisely? Yeah, what precisely? I mean, what is the real motive when you talk about strategic gains in bringing the GHF? Why would Israel and the US bypass internationally recognized organizations like UNRWA, the WFP, and create this parallel entity? What are they avoiding, or what are they trying to achieve?
Well, the existing humanitarian organizations have refused to collaborate because what Israel and the US are trying to achieve is to use aid to coerce the displacement of Palestinians from one area of Gaza's territory to another. And food aid is intentionally limited to perpetuate scarcity and inflict starvation, since what the GHF provides does not meet the need of an intense food supply crisis. I mean, Israel is still blocking deliveries of baby formula urgently needed, as mothers are either dead or too malnourished to feed their babies. And so what Israel is trying to, or hoping to achieve with getting the US to support it is to outsource some of the features of its genocidal campaign to these private security contractors who do logistics, but also are staffed by former CIA officers with close links to the US military.
Right, and what's also significant and concerning here is that this food aid is being dropped without any water. There's no shelter, there's no medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not meeting the demands of a population who have been starved since October 2023. And it is enforcing or institutionalizing starvation by, as I said, not providing enough needs, enough food supply to meet the needs of the population, but is instead using the promise of food as bait to lure civilians towards the aid distribution hubs, which are mostly in the south, with one near the Netzarim corridor.
Right.
And what we've seen repeatedly, last point, just what we've seen repeatedly is that they've been killed regularly by going there.
Right. And the Americans, what about the Americans here? I mean, they also funded other chaotic aid efforts like the failed Pierre last year, the risky airdrops also. Now these GHF boxes, as you said, guarded by snipers. Is the US and Washington also complicit in this ongoing humanitarian collapse in Gaza?
Yes, they're complicit. I would say even more, they're active participants in the genocidal war, and the GHF is only the latest initiative that we've seen the US and Israel collaborate in terms of creating a new system that a new parallel system for the delivery of humanitarian aid and for governance. As you were saying, they started doing the airdrops last year, which were also killing Palestinians when the pallets of food were failing to open properly. Then they tried to set up a maritime corridor, the temporary pier. But all these initiatives in which the Israeli military, but also private logistic companies were involved with, have coincided with an escalation in Israel's military campaign. So we're seeing a pattern whereby aid is increasingly militarized and weaponized to serve Israel's settler colonial ambitions and to destroy the Palestinian population in Gaza and make them lose hope of surviving.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Pietro Stefanini from the University of Edinburgh.
Yeah, go for it, Izzy.
Yeah, tactic, just like I said, it's just another tactic. It's just another, distraction to keep doing what they're doing. It's ridiculous to even call it humanitarian. It's ridiculous for anyone to believe that they're doing anything helpful. None of this shit matters, to be honest. I mean, it matters in a obviously negative way, but my point is none of it can be called aid. None of it can be called humanitarian. It's just a way to keep us distracted thinking, oh, see, they this, and it's just opportunity for people to think that something else is going to happen, even though with that British reporter trying to say, oh, nothing's, it's not true that that's not happening. And then, of course, right before he hangs up, there's a gunshot, and they're going to keep saying and repeating the same old things. Oh, but Hamas is doing this. Hamas is the one who's using human shields, or they're the ones who are stealing. It's just we're going to constantly believe the lies the more that we listen to them. I'm just really ashamed because even that reporter working for Al Jazeera, her saying that the failed pier, when we know damn well what that pier was for, how can you just boil it down to, oh, the failed pier? We're still playing into their bullshit, to be honest. That's just all I have to say. I remember that we're uncensored here, so I'm like, I gotta let it out a little bit here because this is freaking ridiculous. Like, even a news reporter who's supposed to be reporting the truth and isn't, even they're institutionalized, honestly. So it's just ridiculous. It was difficult to watch, obviously, but
So where do we think things are going to go from here? Is there, because I mentioned, last one, I think the only way that Israel is going to be stopped is it's not going to be drone strikes. It's not going to be missiles. It's going to have to literally be a foreign army with boots on the ground in Israel.
in
How many
occupied
armies?
territory.
Yeah, I don't know how many armies are gonna
It's not going to happen.
necessarily set boots on those
Like,
grounds.
I know, right? It seems like this is just going to go on for fucking ever.
What's unfortunate is I've become more of a pessimist as things go on because it feels like when you see other countries get away with it and they know they can now, nobody's saying anything. If you just say like I was reading something about the Iranian regime, they basically are saying, oh, but if it's illegal, it wouldn't happen here, so it's not happening. If it's illegal, we wouldn't do it, and so it's not happening. So to me, it feels like it's just like that. It's like, well, we sent them stuff. It's not our fault what happened afterwards, or just enough to basically say they did it so people are appeased and don't say anything. That's what it just always feels like.
That's because that is all it is. It's just coddling and petting and be quiet for now until the next thing happens. And then we'll make you be quiet again. I don't see any scenario where we have a ground invasion there. I simply don't. We would have already seen that, I think. And it brings up a gross comparison to me. Like, why did we quickly have ground invasions in World War II with European Nazism and fascism? And we don't have them now. Well, everybody sitting here knows exactly why we don't have them now. But I think it's really twofold. I think it's the fact that Palestinians are simply not looked at as human beings. I mean, they literally call them animals and savages. So that's one side of it. But then the other side is everyone is too afraid of the United States. And that fear goes back to money, because everything goes back to money, 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 commerce, commerce, commerce. Then you throw in this horrible idea that Palestinians are not human beings. And it's just the most grotesque storm of factors. And that's why I just don't see it ever happening. I wish I did.
Yeah, like I don't give a fuck about all these Arab states continuing to say, "Oh, Palestine has a right to exist. Palestine has a right to statehood." At the end of the day, it doesn't fucking mean anything. You're not taking any meaningful action.
Yep.
Yeah, it's wild. I I'm only like 100 pages into the Jakarta method, and I really appreciate just the summary of how after World War II, France and Italy wanted to become socialist, but American propaganda worked, even having Frank Sinatra send Italy a letter saying, "Oh, but we're gonna lose U.S. aid." So as Appy was saying about the money, there it is, where everybody's dependent on the U.S. because they're using the U.S. dollar, which is of course why they eliminate Gaddafi and obviously don't want a unified Pan-African currency, for them to have their own money and their own system and everything. So yeah, it's all that dependence and propaganda that worked. That freaking, like I was saying about Frank Sinatra, just having everybody believe that, oh, but the U.S. is so powerful and they might harm us. That was the other thing he said. He said we might lose U.S. aid, but also, like to threaten them that you never know, they might end up. Even Stalin apparently said that put your arms down, thinking that they were that they were like tolerant of him at the time. That the US military might come after us next. But had they done something sooner and done it the right way right after World War II and actually fully eliminated Nazis and nobody had tolerance for any of it, obviously we wouldn't be here right now. So unfortunately, to some degree, I do feel like as much as people don't want to believe that humans are not disposable, we are being shown that they are, because 100 million Native Americans were eliminated. It literally affected climate change, or the climate temperature. Like it's just sick. So everybody keeps thinking, oh, but what about our safety, our personal safety? But also, they want us to despair. They want us to think like, oh, it's this, it's that. It's just all just bits and pieces of a game that we can't win at. But unfortunately, it's because everybody is dependent on the US. Like it's already happened. It already is greater occupation. Everybody's screwed, even Egypt. I mean, Netanyahu even said that he wanted to free Africa next. I mean, come on, like
Oh, God.
it is about world domination. Everybody is playing chicken with the nuke, scenario. And that's why it's time for people to have hard discussions and figure out that, hey, you know what? While life won't be as glamorous for a while, we can survive. We can have the world that we want, but we have to get out of the mindset that the US dollar is the only way. That's just my opinion.
I think we'll need to internally be affecting their money, as well as if anything were to happen externally, I think we would need like a group of countries to like get together and actually say, hey, we're together saying you guys need to back it off. But I don't think any one individual nation is going to do that, nor do I think the Arab nations are going to do that. I think it's a lot at stake for them to want to do that, especially look at the Emirates and look at Dubai and everything where all the money is. It's all tied to the West, so that's not a unified front by any means. So it's I wish I was more of pessimist, optimist.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying in the dating world, right? If he wanted to, he would. Look how fast the West put sanctions on Russia because of its war on Ukraine. So it's not a matter of not being able to do it. It's not being willing to fucking do it.
Or not wanting to because it plays into your hand.
Right.
Yeah.
So another thing I wanted to bring up too is, since I brought up the West, in the West, liberal democracies have not only failed to prevent genocide, they're actively facilitating it via arms sales and financial support. As is usually the case in around the world, governments are at odds with their people, and in the context of continuing to military support Israel, in the UK specifically, I read that there was a poll that came out. 56% of voters supported a complete embargo on arms sales to Israel. Despite that, the UK government continues to do so, and in the US, that number is 55%. Short of mass protest, what do we think that people in the West can do to help end this genocide? What is our role, essentially?
Oh, I would love to answer this. Can I answer this?
Yes?
I'm a menace. So we need to disrupt it. And I mean, we need to physically disrupt it. We need to destroy it. We need to, you're going to have to, decide how I can say this, but
It's uncensored.
if,
Say whatever you want.
Carl is always listening to me. So that's my short answer, is that we have to disrupt it and we have to destroy it. And I mean, literally, like, think about acts of industrial sabotage. And this can be done from inside and outside these facilities that produce these weapons. Their internet interfaces, their other infrastructure stuff like electricity and water. We can block workers from getting in there. But the issue with that is we all know that those are good tactics and that's what we can work. We can physically stop this. We can make it impossible for them to continue doing this. However, we are not getting people to respond to direct action in this way. We have such a grotesque problem here with people sitting in comfort and convenience and safety. And Izzy actually just touched on this, that we have to accept and move forward with knowing our lives as they have been have to stop. We cannot keep doing this. We are doing it at the expense of other human beings around the world. We are doing it in exchange for a Holocaust. I sometimes wonder, myself included, how we sit here and do this. But we're just so conditioned to it. It's like it's all we know. Every time I try to organize or plan something, you get a lot of vocal support on the internet. But then when it comes down to the day and to doing it, it's always like the same 3, 5, 10, 12 people. We cannot disrupt and destroy and block these things if that's what we're doing. And I do not know how to get people to understand that and make the transition, because they just keep doing these fucking sign parades. Call your rep, march in a sign parade that we bring the police to, blah, blah, blah. No, we have to go take some very serious action. And that means there's going to be enormous risks, but we have to take them. Because if we pose the question to other people, what would you have done in Nazi Germany? You're doing it now. Okay, well, we are all doing that now. And we need to hold our own feet and everyone else's feet to the fire, like immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in order to get to that point of disruption with enough numbers, we have to have harder conversations with more than just our same little circle. As you said, there's always going to be, first of all, like a lot of people who end up resorting to their comfort. You think like, what the heck? Like we went from 20 to the same 5. But I think we need to include a lot more people and continue educating a lot more people. I mean, I know there's not time for everybody to just sit there and read theory and take our time educating ourselves. But at the same time, if a lot more people had difficult conversations with their neighbors, with their family, and recognize if they truly cared about human life, if they truly care about their own life and the future of not just children, but the earth, then you need to act with a sense of urgency, and you need to have those tough conversations, and you need to get used to the discomfort, but you also need to be optimistic and remind people that there are good things to come from this too. While we do need armed struggle, we do need community. We do need to help each other meet our needs. So it's not just mutual aid and getting together to have food, but it's really about what things deep down do you need? Because clearly Americans have been struggling for a long time. A lot of people have been having this like what I feel like is like, obviously because of colonialism, we sit there and blame ourselves and wonder like, why am I not happy? Why, right? But the answers have been there all along. We know that it's because of the empire that we are so hyper individualized, that families are no longer the same, that community does have an effect on people's mental health, and the loneliness epidemic or whatever would be quite different if people were getting together more often to talk in person, or at least have discussions like this where it's more than just the same few, where you're really trying to reach out. That's just a start, you know? Yeah, exactly, Jordan.
Oh, yes, exactly. Spot on right there. I agree. And this is something that the new front that we created in my area is working very diligently on, because where we work, this is a very difficult area to do this work in, geographically and culturally. But we have advantages that come from that too. One is you can hide a lot of places and a lot of things here in these mountains. But we have another resource to tap into, and that is people that probably don't agree with us politically, but we do share a common enemy, and we do share a love and appreciation for, you know, the Second Amendment and gardening tools and whatnot. And down the line, I think we're going to be able to have support there. But in the immediate interim, we are struggling to figure out exactly how to get people to go through these difficult conversations, and not just go through them, but to follow through with them. Like, what are we going to see here after this? And it takes a very careful approach to try to go from talking about, you know, food and education and healthcare and things to, hey, we literally need armed struggle here. We're at this point. We're not waiting for it. We're not getting ready for it. I mean, we're there. So we have to get ready very fast. But we're just struggling to find answers of how to get them past that hump. And this is seasoned organizers. Sometimes I think the only thing that's going to get people to come to action is if something very terrible happens on our own soil. And that might not even do it. It's very frustrating.
That's already happening.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but they don't
exactly.
see it that way because it's not on their doorstep.
But before their eyes, right? All the money, everything is just disappearing. But because we're able to still somewhat function normally, people aren't feeling that sense of urgency. It's easier to keep all that hidden and to dissociate. But something I wanted to add is, as far as keeping optimism, I feel like there's just not enough mention of the land back movement. For me, how I see it, especially being Palestinian on Turtle Island, and now feeling like, you know, of course, like just so sick because, I mean, we'd always known and sympathized with the Native Americans in their struggle against colonialism, but obviously it more so clicks when you literally witness what's happening to your family simultaneously, like living on Turtle Island and paying taxes for a home, and everybody saying, oh, I just want to buy a piece of land, but you're going to be paying taxes for the rest of your life because people had to be murdered in order for you to be living where you're at. It's never going to fully be yours. So that's why I'm just so far beyond the surface level of the discussion where leftists, not all leftists, but liberal leftists, you know, that surface level, like we need to go, just, at least for me, that the glass has been shattered now, the mirror has been shattered. So in my opinion, it would be you'd see a lot more optimism if we actually gave Native Americans the mic, if we actually listened to what they would want, how they would lead. Let's start with that. Why not? The way that you get organized, everyone's like, oh, what are we going to do? And we're all over the place. Like, well, we need armed struggle and we need to get organized. Well, let's start with that. They are the ones who should be leading. Native Americans should be the ones who are speaking. What do they want to do with their land? And then from there, we can come together to be like, okay, yeah, guess what? now that you've moved from the liberal mindset to the leftist mindset of, oh, I get it, no one is illegal on stolen land. Don't worry, you're not going to be shipped back to Europe because they're not colonizers. They're not here to erase your identity. You're still going to have your American identity because unfortunately it did leave a big impact on the world. So it's not like things are going to change so rapidly and you're going to lose, literally your family, your identity. There's not going to be mass chaos the way that colonialism has brought mass chaos. So let's start with that, because for me, number one is the earth. The earth is cooking right now, right? So where the hell are all those freaking reusable straw people and the people who care about sea turtles and all that shit? Like, where are they right now? If you're so against everything that Trump is doing, and you're not against when Democrats do it, when Kamala was for freaking fracking and all that shit and working with BP and all that. I mean, come on, like, it's time to move away from all that stuff. Native Americans are the ones who freaking started the concept of democracy in the first place. Like, we're forgetting so much here, you know what I mean? Just a lot is being left out, and that's why we're going to continue feeling that confusion and that feeling of being lost, because there is this space here that needs to be filled, and that's how we fill it, is listening to more indigenous voices, centering those voices, and then implementing the things that revolutionaries have been telling us from day one. Like, I tell everybody, like, listen to Kwame Ture. There's a reason why Pan-Africanism is what matters, because as much as we love China, yes, but any empire is bad because they are still depleting the earth and still doing shit to destroy the earth. And I think we need a pause. I think we just need a health pause. Everybody will be okay. You'll still be able to eat. You will survive, especially if you keep the mindset and you be optimistic. Don't lose yourself in despair the way colonialism wants us to despair. If we're gonna keep giving them our soul, then we're gonna keep being lost. So, off my soapbox.
Can I just add something to that real quick? It goes right back to what I said before Izzy spoke, and every word, literally no notes except this one. This brings up another unique challenge in my area. So, Chelsea, Rednecks Rising, and I live on two sides of the Koala boundary where EBCI's reservation is. They do not like to work with us. Not because we've had any bad experiences. We have never. And we do sometimes work in the same spaces and circles. But understandably, they do not trust us because we are white. Again, very understandable. I wouldn't either. But there are many, many, many comrades there. And we do not know how to tap into that. And I have felt that organizers out west might be able to help us with this. What do you think about that?
I mean, I live on the West Coast. I'm perfectly open to helping out, but where do you specifically see our role in radicalization? Because from my perspective, it seems like people in Appalachia would have better success being able to communicate with that population, especially from me being from California. Like, I feel like we're a bit alienating towards a big segment of the US population, either out of ignorance or lack of knowledge, a combination of both. But we do have, of course, a bunch of great comrades in California, but I do worry about a messaging issue.
So I agree, everything you said. And so the help is helping us as organizers, and I hate to use the term leaders, but it's just how you fall into roles. Understand how we could better approach Native Americans. And because we don't even need, I don't think there's a lot of radicalizing that needs to be done. It's how are we going to come together and work together when there's a lot of very, very, very understandable ancient mistrust? But we need each other. Well, we need them, or they don't need us. let me backtrack. They don't need us, but we need them. And where I work, this is an extremely important group of people to work with for a whole lot of reasons. So when I say perhaps organizers and leftists and all out west, where there are larger reservations and larger native populations, maybe they have experience they could share with us as organizers that might help us start to bridge some of these gaps. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, definitely, and that aligns with the work that I've done locally with the Chumash, the indigenous tribe where I'm from. And going back to Izzy's original point about land back and indigenous, rising indigenous voices and spreading indigenous consciousness, etc. I mean, this tackles so many problems, right? It's multifaceted, and where my area of expertise is the climate crisis, and that's really where I see a huge, huge possibility of restoring indigenous land stewardship back and starting to tackle these problems. Because if we don't have an environment, if we don't have an ecologically sustainable planet, nothing else really matters.
So I just wanted to say that, well, you're onto something, Abby, as far as being able to get through to your local natives. I mean, like you said, it's understandable that they would feel weary of, wanting to collaborate with um, technically a settler group who thinks they know what's best and mean well. But unfortunately, I'm sure, of course, not only from past trauma, but sometimes, even in leftist spaces, it happens where people mean well and they want to lead, but people are not receptive to feedback whenever an indigenous person speaks and says, hey, your comment is harmful or your approach is harmful. People have this tendency to resort to their white savior mindset, and then to, unfortunately, every single time it's happened. That's why I'm grateful to even be on here right now, speaking, because I feel like it happens a lot where people literally just kick out the indigenous voices or people of color. They literally will just create a whole new group chat and then leave them out and say that we're the ones who are causing leftist infighting. I just really kind of like that terminology kind of triggers me a little bit, because for me personally, it's been used to weaponize whenever we have feedback that, like, hey, your approach is actually quite harmful. Well, this is what we think should be better. And they're like, you're just calling me a normalizer, and they're taking it personally, and they're making it like their voices should be centered. So I think the best ways to make sure that um, that the groups that you're working with feel centered, that, hey, you are the leader here. We want to know what you would like us to do, and how can we work together with you and show you that not only are we sincere, but we're actually listening to what you have to say. And it's understandable too that they don't want to have to be the ones to lead either, right? Like, oh well, why do we have to be the ones to save our own? Like, I feel like even when the march to Gaza opportunity arose, a lot of white people came to me and said, oh, are you thinking about going? You should go. And I'm like, for some reason, of course, it's a little bit of ego. I'm like, I felt a little bit offended by that. So why don't you go? Why does it always have to be the Palestinians who have to sacrifice themselves? I mean, I've lost family. I've lost family in '67, and I'm not saying, like, of course, to some degree, yes, as a human being, we all care about our safety, and it should be, why don't we go? But why do people always think that Palestinians have to be the ones to sacrifice themselves to save Palestinians? Why can't it be us all? Why would I just let you stay here and be comfortable and then go sacrifice myself, and here we go, lose another Palestinian? Where's the benefit in that? But back to the bringing indigenous voices forward, I think you're onto something, that maybe we could bring them together even more so and say, hey, we're willing to reach out to other groups, even if they're as far west as the Mwekma Ohlone tribe, who on the Trail of Tears came all the way out here on horseback, just for them to be kicked off of the National Mall lawn for Kamala Harris's freaking one Democratic Party, which was really sickening to witness. But yeah, if we could bring them together and to continue and ask them, what could we do better, and to make this something that leftists see and everybody sees, that, hey, this is what we need. We want to center indigenous voices. And then the people who want to lead will step up and be like, oh, good, look, there's actually a crowd who wants to listen. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Just two quick comments. My biggest problems with the whole leftist infighting dichotomy is, for one, it seems to be used to shut down debate. And second of all, it places a priority on ideology rather than concepts and policies. Like it's Marxist versus anarchist. It's not what are we actually talking about? What is our action plan? It's just fucking counterproductive. Go ahead, Abby.
All of that. Back to what Izzy just said. That's one of the reasons I backtracked off using the term leader. I don't like that. It's difficult for me to describe that role without using that word, though. What I'm looking at here with our collective and our front in Appalachia and EBCI is, how can I say this? It's not about us needing their help. I would like to see them be centered. I would like to see them take the leadership role. You don't need two little white girls from Appalachia being, running that show. And right now, that's what it is, because if we put this down, nobody's picking it up here. That's why we can't put it down. And that's why we're so overworked, because we just don't have that. So yes, additional bodies and minds would be helpful, but everything related to the planet and the environment and climate change, and just like what you said, land stewardship, all of this, it all fits together. And they are the people that need to be in charge. And I'm really just reiterating what Izzy said. So I just want to be very clear that from our perspective here, with what we're looking for with them, I would love to not be centered in any way. I mean, I would love to take a back seat to this. And to go on just another side note of that, we don't have a lot of people of color here either. So it's very important that we find them and bring them in as well, because we do not need this being, a white-centered, white-led thing. And that's a huge part of why this is so important to us. So, excellent point.
I just want to add on to that. Another thing is that we have to show them that we're serious. So just an example that I think for some reason, I mean, maybe somebody has thought of it to actually do it, I don't know. But why don't people actually write in their wills that if their homes are paid for example, if you're fortunate enough, right, is like wealth distribution, for example, as of course, any form of reparations would help. But when it comes to land and home ownership, why don't people actually say my land and home is to go to the Native Americans? It shouldn't just be just for your own family. I know for a fact that if you were to try to tell your whoever, obviously, I know it's difficult these days, but still, you could figure out locally who you would speak to, and say, what, we want to leave this home, after I've passed and my family has some safety and ability to live here, that the land goes back to the natives of, the original owners of this land. So that's just like one example. Like, why don't people write them in their wills? Keep talking about wealth distribution. I mean, although things have changed and money really is obviously just a concept at this point, I really just think all this shit is just invisible. The US dollar means nothing. We're just going to keep thinking that that everything's going to stay the same. But it's a start, whatever little things like that you can do it, show them that you're serious. Don't just talk about it. Not that I'm saying that you are happy, but I'm just saying, like, if anybody has considered something like that, like, oh, I wonder what happened to the people here. Well, look up the name, go to LandNet and figure it out and talk to them and say, what could we do differently? How can I distribute my wealth? How do we get more people around this area? Perhaps I could get me and my neighbors to one day sign over the land back to them. Although I think it's a little bit too late to some degree. We really need anti-colonialism. We really need to just start fresh and, approach land back in a more serious manner. But I just wanted to add that the show me aspect.
Yeah, I think the short answer for your question is going back to one of your original points, which is the correlative relationship between white projection and abolition, right? if white people own a home or they own property and they pass it down to indigenous communities, I think in their minds, they think, oh, this means that I'm losing something and my family is losing something.
Just as a note back to the comment about how to get that indigenous, commentary in there. I think one thing that I can definitely say I've seen a lot is where people, if they do approach you to get your voice, it's not as much about getting your involvement. It's more about just having your narrative added to their agenda. So I think one thing that I've seen that some people do that seems very approachable way is to kind of be involved in that indigenous cultures, whatever they're trying to do, kind of show that you want to help them in their message, in their um, whatever their agenda is, and then kind of build rapport that way. And I think a lot of times, if someone who is of a minority group notices that they're actually getting a platform to speak about what they want to speak about as opposed to coming in just to speak to what you want them to speak to, they're more likely to want to talk if they actually know someone wants to hear their story and actually be able to project and amplify it for them. Those are really big.
If I could just say too, like with as far as Palestine goes, and you were saying like, how is anything going to change unless there's boots on the ground from everywhere else? Obviously, this was sort of somewhat their plan, right? Playing the game of chicken with nuclear warfare. Um, but I think it just kind of goes to show, obviously, like we know it's already anti-colonialism and that we need to respect the earth and whatnot. Um, but unfortunately it's not something that can happen overnight, and we have to be careful to some degree too, which just I somewhat understand why neighboring Arab countries have intervened somewhat, and that's because the Palestinians are the ones who deserve to have the right to say what the heck they want next. But unfortunately, because the regime and the occupation thinks 100 to 1,000 years in advance, yeah, right, for real, shout out to Toby's, the only people to actually step in and do something from early on, while simultaneously being starved and bombed. um, it's going to take definitely more of that, but also it just needs to click with everybody that we are not accepting of a one world Western order, because even Kamala Harris said that, and I hate that I've mentioned her name so much during this podcast already, but I'll just never forget that she said she looks forward to the US being the world leaders, being world dominators. They literally want to dominate the world. So, all it is Jerusalem is just the next Washington D.C., So um, it's like going to be a much tougher breakup really than we realize, as far as being dependent on the system and being anti-military. But yeah.
Just a comment on the Arab nations. I think what's interesting is that when it comes to the Arab nations, a lot of them did say, we don't want to be involved because then we're taking that determination away. Where if we, bring Palestinians into our nation, then they'll completely lose their land. But then what's unfortunate is on the other side of the conversation, I was hearing people say, well, even the Arab nations don't care about the Palestinians, that they're not helping them. And it's just so hard hearing both sides being so paralleled, but not being in that mindset of all of our struggles are this interconnected thing, that if we start at this one spot and start untangling, we might actually have a chance. It seems so far away from that conversation that it's really difficult. How are people not yet connecting that if a woman, for example, can be completely oppressed and wiped out by the Taliban or bombed or whatever it is in the Middle East, that's just as likely to happen to you somewhere else. If they see you being taken advantage of in another nation and no one stands for you, why wouldn't another bully, another regime, another government do the same? It doesn't make sense to me why that hasn't yet rallied people up.
So my question was, is it, lack of knowledge of intersectional issues, or is it fear of US empire, or is it a combination of both?
I think both. I think there's a lot of propaganda. I think there's a lot of fear of the US. I think it's also commingled with that kind of like certain people's superiority complex. Well, if the US wins and they have a great empire, I'm up there, you know what I mean? So I think it's very convoluted, but as far as the people that actually would gain something from it, that are aware, I think it's right now, at least in the US, it's fear of losing your comfort, which is still wild to me.
Go ahead, Appy.
That last part right there. It's it's the exact scenario as people in the United States who think that someday they're going to be a billionaire's friend. I cannot, for the life of me, wrap my head around that logic. It is just so out there to me. And trying to work with people in that mindset, yes, exactly. The stripper, she really likes me, honestly. It's exactly that. And that mindset is extremely difficult to overcome. And that's what we're hoping we can do. But we see that this is likely going to be a monumental task. And it just ties right back into that whole comforts thing. It's just too easy to stay in that status quo. And I just cannot figure out the piece we're missing here. I mean, there's like a lot of small pieces of it that I understand, but it's the getting over that hump. And part of it goes right back to this.
The optimist side in me thinks that more people in the US in particular are getting it, given that we have current military occupation in Los Angeles, and more people are finding out that ICE agents train with the IDF. So, what do we think about that? Yeah, not happening fast.
No, are we seeing that though?
I
Are we
mean,
really seeing that? So let me tell you that we are not seeing that here.
really?
Here,
Anytime I bring up a police state, people just look at me like, so I
they
think people
love it.
it's
The
still on a
people here
humorous
love it.
level.
I guess my
Last night,
question is not my question isn't necessarily accessibility to information and finding out about that. It's, do we think that this is a positive development overall in as a source of radicalization? Do we think that maybe this will allow more people to connect the dots?
maybe, but I want to say yes to that. And I feel like I'm being pessimistic saying maybe, but I'm also looking at it through regional glasses because in this area, they love this. They eat it up like freaking candy. It makes me sick. I was watching incident that live video in Los Angeles last night. Absolutely horrified by what I witnessed happen in response to some drops of water hitting somebody. Like, are you kidding me? And how people watch that and aren't immediately driven to action, first of all. I mean, my response is, well, I'll just get on a plane and go to Los Angeles and start getting in these people's faces myself because, that's my response, but that's not most people's response. And the way that action escalated last night, and I'm just using that as a very recent example, obviously it's happening all over the place every day. So I want to think that that will radicalize people, but I also see it as one of those things that when it's not on your doorstep, it's not worth getting uncomfortable for. And I'm very fed up with that mindset, to be frank.
And how do we get people to understand that? Because I think it was Shirin that pointed out people need to realize that this could happen to you too. And I think for leftists and for everybody on this panel, clearly it's obvious that this could happen to anybody at any given day. So how do we get people to understand that?
That's the $1 million question, dude. I mean, I want that answered as well, because that right now is the biggest barrier to our organizing and moving forward with a militant united front that can take real action. That is the obstacle. I
Yeah,
wish I knew.
literally fucking kidnapping people. This is not hyperbolic. Masked men kidnapping people, taking them to undisclosed locations. I mean, how do you not see that?
Well, I can say that, like where I am, and I'm certain in several other areas of the country, it goes back to what I said earlier about how people do not see Palestinians as human. These people do not see immigrants and migrant workers as people. They are less than. They are objects. They are something to go stick in a swamp somewhere. And that's a huge, ugly thing about it.
The only time it changes if there's a direct connection, because I also lived in the Midwest. Until, I don't know, Sally is married to Jose, she doesn't understand any of the, politics or what she might go through, what that might mean. And then all of a sudden, Jose gets taken in the street. Oh my God, there's mass men taking people on the street. Oh, now it's happening.
So I think part of it, like we had talked about before the show started, is like having way more conversations, getting people to talk about things that are uncomfortable with their friends, with their neighbors. And as much as I despise liberals, we unfortunately need to keep talking to them and get them to talk to their neighbors as well. Because I mean, I know that they're blue MAGA too. Technically, they really are police state lovers. They do believe a lot of propaganda, unfortunately, but it takes us breaking it down as often as possible and showing them the examples and showing them the statistics of what's happening with the earth, while still holding respect, of course, for their religious beliefs. But I personally feel that even if Jesus was coming back tomorrow, how could you not feel ashamed for what we have done, for the way that we've left the earth, for the way that we have amplified the empire that literally took his life? How have we not been able to implement his teachings, stuff like that, whether you're a Christian or not? But like, obviously we keep having to center the Christian voice because all of this is the quote unquote self-prophesized teachings that are happening, when really, in my opinion, it's literally just it's not even just my opinion, actually. It's a fact, right? That all this stuff has been rewritten by really sick people. These are not the teachings of God. It was all just stolen information from Africa, rewritten by primarily white men, and now it's been weaponized against people. Because, I mean, honestly, Abraham can just freaking go back to Iraq at this point, because the way that they've weaponized the Bible and manipulated the Bible, and then somehow conflated that the state is a part of this, is something holy, is really just is sickening, and you have to point it out to people. Like, how can you believe in Jesus? How can you believe in anything holy and kind? Even if you're fully freaking atheist, how can you not understand that it's wrong to just throw away everything that we've been given? And yeah, it is a matter in the end of people versus state. And I also think that the no tolerance for anyone who is a cop, who is an ICE member, who is in the military, they need to be spoken to. I think that's the only way that we'll win too, is by speaking to them as human beings and say, hey, why are you doing this? Like, aside from obviously the way that the military recruits the poor, can you get in touch with your soul? Can you try to comprehend that what you're doing is not for the greater good? That's the only way we're going to win, because otherwise, obviously, with tech the way it is and freaking robot dogs and all that shit, we're screwed, but we can win. It's possible. I think we just need to start practicing our lassos, bring out the guillotines, and yeah, if we can lasso up a robot dog or two, then we'll be all right. But so long as there's a person facing you, whether it's in LA or what, it doesn't matter. Like, I just keep thinking, like, hold up a mirror and be like, look at yourself in the freaking mirror, dude. Like, how are you doing this? This is you. You're literally shooting yourself in the foot. Like, what are you doing?
I just want to add a couple of things to that, and I'll do the quick one first. That was really interesting what you said, connected to people's faith and approaching people from a place where you're like, listen, I know this is your faith and so on and so forth, but look at how it's being distorted. Look at how it's being weaponized. This is not the word of God. This is nothing Jesus would have had anything to do. In fact, Jesus is the literal antithesis of this. This is directly relevant to the work that we do here. And it's somewhere where I am strong talking to people. I grew up the eldest granddaughter of a very prominent Southern Baptist pastor in Georgia. And so I have plenty of knowledge and background. Now, I am atheist, probably because I grew up that way. Um, but I am able to speak to people from that child and teenager and all that went to Sunday school, and that helps me bridge so many gaps here. It gets people to listen to me. This is such a good and important tactic. So I think that's awesome that you brought that up. And then I forgot my second point while telling my first point, so I'll just end it there.
Yeah, I just want to say I came across an interesting post the other day that I completely agreed with. They said every genocide has been done in the name of God and not the devil. Isn't that interesting?
Wow, that's really profound. That's really profound.
I
I'm
also
going to
think
add that
it's
to my repertoire.
I also think it's interesting that, God made us in his image and God just looks like a dude. So, it's I feel like they're telling on
A
themselves
white
there.
dude, particularly.
Yeah.
No, not the blonde Jesus.
Oh yeah, just crazy.
Blonde, blue-eyed, you know, baby Jesus.
Can we talk about Alligator Alcatraz and some of the things related to that? So there's, a concentration camp that's being built in Southwest Florida. I found it interesting but not surprising that one day after they said that it was going to be hurricane proof, it flooded. And I think this is all by design. So supposedly, in air quotes, this facility is designed to be able to take on a Category 2 hurricane, which is 110-mile-per-hour winds in Southwest Florida. Just in the last 3-4 years, they've had multiple hurricanes that have exceeded Category 2, and I think this is all by design. They want people to die there. They know that they're going to, and they want them to.
It's horrific. I don't know if Florida needed more, you know. I
Laura
just
Loomer, the 65 million comment, that alligators will have 65 million meals, talking directly about the entire Latino population of the US.
it's
That
horrifying.
was enraging. Enraging. That's an understatement still.
I feel like it's got to be just surreal. Like we're all living in a wild world where they can just openly just say these things now, right? I mean, I feel like one step at a time, they just kept going, and then everyone didn't, no one said anything. So, it just keeps going a step forward. They're just blatantly saying that, you need to shoot your neighbors. You need to, have your neighbors eaten by alligator. It's wild.
Go
Very
ahead.
dehumanizing. Just
Yeah.
sick that people have been adding to that, to that sickness. Sorry, Abby, go ahead.
Oh no, you're fine. Totally agree. It's sickening and enraging really are woeful understatements here. That 65 million thing made me nearly physically ill. It was horrible. So two things I wanted to say about Alligator Alcatraz, and the first one is is the fact that this facility is within Big Cypress. This is
Are you there? You dropped off. Oh, we lost her. Dang. I really want to hear what she had to say. Okay, she's back.
where it is in itself is disgusting. Now,
Hey, we
the
uh
sec
we lost you for a sec. Could you repeat what you said?
oh
From Big
God, I'm so
Cypress.
sorry.
Yeah, start
Yeah,
over from where you left off at Big Cypress.
okay. So the fact that the facility is within Big Cypress, I mean, this is national park. There's wetlands management, wildlife management. I mean, this is a huge preservation. And anyone that's ever been down there, anywhere in the Everglades, and I was both fortunate and tortured to spend 28 days canoeing there as a teenager. This is wild land, and it should be so protected. So this is a non-human issue. Obviously, the human issue here is way more important, but I just found this particularly striking. Like you've literally built a concentration camp in the middle of a national park, just a whole other gross level to it. Now, that being said, I want to go back to what we talked about what do we do that's not protesting. There is one road to this facility. There is one road in and one road out, and it is a small little 2-lane road. There are about 400 employees at this place. Now, it does have a runway because this was an abandoned airport originally. Why do we have an airport in the middle of the swamp? I don't know, but there's a lot of options here for us to deal with this issue down there. And the fact that it is where it is, we could easily block that road. I mean, we could do all kind of things.
Why don't we
I don't
fucking
want to
destroy
say,
the road?
huh?
Why don't we destroy the road?
Yes, destroy the road, killdozer the road. I mean, there are so many opportunities right here for exactly what I'm saying. This is how we stop this. And there is a group of us from here that is going to go down there and do just that. But why, please tell me, why is there not already a massive caravan of people headed down there? Why is a ragtag little small group of people from Appalachia about to drive to the swamp and put their bodies in between these monsters and the people that they're hurting there? Why is there not a mass caravan? How are we not responding to this in that way? That place should already be dust and rubble for the alligators to deal with. No, I'm just kidding. Don't leave the alligators a mess, but you get my point.
I wish there were more people like you that were speaking out, though, because the more you have people from the Appalachians and you have people that from the Midwest, and it becomes more normalized for other people to also speak for the same, because we don't get to see that. Every time I see a white woman, especially like out there, fighting for freedoms and for other people's, autonomy, it just makes me so happy, because that's exactly how it should be. And if they're going to take it more seriously because you're the one out there, by God, be out there, Thank you, because it's unfortunate. The dehumanization is also in the commentary of the people that live here as well. Like, it's very minimized. You have millions of, Arabs, you've got millions of Muslims, you've got millions of Iranians, you've got millions of whatever all over the world. But I mean, just in the US alone, we've got our own little, communities that have neighbors and loved ones, and you would think that these people would speak out. And so seeing it being more normalized that there are white groups also, like, as much as you might think that that's not very encouraging, it's actually very encouraging for this side of things. I gotta say.
I really appreciate that. I'm so glad that you said that. That was like the most validating thing I've heard in days, because
Yeah.
sometimes I worry, again, like just what I was talking about earlier about working with EBCI with this, like I worry about us being very white centered. But I recently spent several weeks reassessing how I felt about risks and being more forward facing and being louder, because I felt this way. I was like, nobody from here is talking like this. And all they do is sign parades. And I'm like, if I start putting my face out there and my voice, and people hear that I'm talking about very real action here, that's what I hope will happen, what you said. So that was so encouraging, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
And genuinely thank you for all your effort and work that you do, because if someone like myself, like I'm dual citizen at this point, but if I were to be at a location and it's just myself and a bunch of people of color, and they come for us, for there to be a little variety of people feels a little safer. It feels a little more, you feel like you actually have community to stand with. It's not just me out there, and if they take my American passport, my other one's no good either, I'm going to be in the swamp. So it's good to know that there are people standing with you that know that they have less risk, not necessarily less risk, but they're not being as targeted in this point in time, still standing with you.
Yeah, for a lack of better words, I think this is proper application of white privilege. And that's how I saw
Yes, it is.
that's how I saw my role, like during the George Floyd protests, on the front lines, being in the front, knowing that the police would not be targeting me specifically, defending my black and brown comrades in the back.
Proper use of white privilege. I love that.
Is there anything else you guys want to say about the Alligator Alcatraz thing? Because, I could take this a variety of directions.
Well, I think one of the things we need to be looking at here and come up with some digestible ways to present this to the people. And I do not mean doing that by shit posting or regurgitating meme content on Instagram. I mean, truly present it to the people and explain to them, because most people just want to liken it to Nazi Germany. And look, that comparison is accurate. I'm not saying that's not accurate, but people act like that was the start of that. That was like the be all end all. And that is not true. And the way that we are taught history here in the United States in particular, lots of people just simply do not know. And, looking at the fact that Hitler and Nazi Germany literally took inspiration from the United States and other colonial powers like Spain and Britain. I mean, there's all kind of people that have had detention camps, concentration camps, whatever you want to call them. Look what settlers and colonizers did to the native people right here in the United States. And I think people need to understand that this isn't just there was a Holocaust. There's been things like going on and on and on. And we have got to be able to show them the parallels between that and what is happening right now, because it isn't any different. And people seem to think that these very historical events will only ever be something they read in a social studies book. And that is simply not true.
I'm so glad you brought up that point because in the US in particular, there's an overemphasization of the Nazis in World War II. Like, we get it. They're fascists, they're evil fucking people. But what about the Rwanda genocide? What about the Armenian genocide? How much do you know about that? And the reason that I think that so many people know about the Holocaust is because the US was supposedly the good guy, right? And also, it was predominantly white people that were impacted.
That part right there at the end, that part, it's that.
I think you're right too that Appy, as you're mentioning, like as far as disruption goes, the sooner that something is done about this, the better, because if we're okay or silent while this is happening to supposedly just immigrants or whoever, right? It's only a matter of time before it's literally just everybody. And unfortunately, it is like Nazi Germany, and unfortunately, it is a concentration camp, but they're going to keep calling it, oh, this is just a correction center for, just like the phraseology that's used for Gaza, describing it as an open air prison. I mean, it took a long time for me to, unfortunately for me to really grasp that it was a concentration camp and that people should be using that language, because why are you calling it a prison? Of course, it's so easy for people, especially American brainwashed mindset, to think, oh, but that word prison, there's a reason why they're in prison. They are associating it with criminals when it was literally just people who were expelled from their land and put into a condensed area, into a modern day concentration camp. So calling it even open air prison is obviously harmful. It really is literally a concentration camp, just a modern day concentration camp. But I know that language is somewhat overused, kind of what you were getting at. I think that we have to be careful with how we use that language here to some degree, and over normalizing it. But at the same time, the sooner that something is done, the better, because the more that we allow the empire to do these things, the more that they're going to get away with, and the more that, who the hell knows what's next, I mean, obviously we do know what's next, but still, like.
I actually just had a question about that language. I agree. That is important. Open air prison? No, that sounds like the place the ladies would walk around on Orange is the New Black out in the courtyard. That's an open air prison. Concentration camp is the term. But, and you went on to say this, how do we deal with that when we get pushback from people saying, oh, well, you can't call it a concentration camp. That's a Holocaust thing. That's anti-Semitic. That's this, that, and the other. And so that's one side. And then the other side is, it'll just become normalized, like all these other horrible things that we used to be appalled by, and now they're part of our daily life. Like, I think this is a real battle for us.
I try to quash it early on. I right away call it out as propaganda. It's proven. I mean, there's a downloadable freaking PDF on the internet from 2008 for the occupation, for how to win arguments for the occupation's sake, So right away, I call that shit out. I'm like, you can stop right there with the propaganda. Even when it comes to questions like, do you condemn this and that? That's propaganda. I don't have the time I'm not going to answer that. I'm not even going to entertain that. And that is something, unfortunately, that I was victim to early on after October 7th, from freaking people that I knew in real life. Like, I was just really shocked, because people who know Palestinians in real life know that we are kind. And unfortunately, even used against us. That like, oh yeah, the Arabs are known as a hospitable people, like we're idiots, you know, like, oh, they're so hospitable, and they just kept taking advantage of our hospitality. Um, so even that's propaganda, you know, like obviously we're not perfect, and yeah, there's flaws, and every freaking all of mankind has a lot of things to work towards and to work on, especially when it comes to the whitewashing and pinkwashing and feminism, the fake feminism, because of, you know, how, for example, obviously the statistics of rape that occurs in the United States and Canada. I mean, it's literally a hatred towards women, towards Mother Earth, towards ourselves. There's, you know, sorry, I was kind of a little bit on a tangent, different direction here, but it does come down to self-love and respecting humankind all at once and calling out the bullshit.
I think going back to having the deep conversations and uncomfortable conversations with your neighbor is how we really get to a large source of progress, right? Because the reality is most people don't understand what socialism is. They don't know what communism is. They don't know what decolonizing is. But if you talk about things, I find in loose terms, like healthcare, for example, is a big source of radicalization for a lot of people. So you say like, hey, don't you think it's fucked up that the government is taking away billions of dollars and your grandma now has to die because of that? You can go down very vast rabbit holes like that and start connecting the dots with people. So it's it's frustrating, but I think there's times where we have to just take a step back and realize where people are at, and then you'll find that you can actually get people to get on board with your positions. But that's just me.
Oh, no, I agree. That's very crucial. And that's actually an area I can struggle with. I spent a lot of years working in a lot of progressive and leftist spaces and working with a lot of liberals, and I have run out of patience with them. Now, I recognize the need for bridging and radicalizing. Believe me, all I do is say, I'm just not the person to do that role. Fortunately, there are lots of roles in this movement, and I fill other ones. And we have some very good people that fill that role. So it's key. But I do well bridging gaps with Red MAGA because I can just use that very sweet Southern girl approach. And this is how I do it. Oh my God, it's so fucked up that you lost your job. Or, oh my God, I can't believe your grandma still doesn't have that oxygen machine. I have to approach it there because as soon as I do it that way, they see me as empathetic and sweet. And this is, I'm using white privilege, I'm using like girl privilege, Southern privilege. I don't care, I'll use all the privileges. I just, as long as they hear me and can start to see we are fighting against the same oppressor here for the same reasons. And it does not matter about communism or socialism or anarchism or collectivism or syndicalism or any freaking ism here. We have to approach these people as people. And another piece of that that I had to personally battle was like struggling with allowing like more intimate connections with comrades and with people in my community. But then I realized we're going to die if we don't have that. And I cannot be preaching at people to build this net if I myself am not weaving myself into that net. And so I did a whole lot of work to overcome that. And that is a strength for this. And this is the perfect approach. Like, just don't bring up any of the specific. Talk about the real issues, the meat and potatoes things.
Absolutely. I just wanted to add to that. Discussing with your neighbors is one step, but something else that I think should really be considered too, as far as working towards separating the weaponization of religion, is how do we get through to I hate to say it, maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic, but like Zionist churches, how do we get through to people who care about humanity and are in that kind of limbo space, that like that little bit of maybe not doubt, right? Because it's so ingrained in them to just rely so easily on, oh, Jesus died for my sins, so therefore all my sins are excusable. How do we not only hold people accountable, but start to question, hey, you know what, like maybe I should be talking to more people and see if we can reach out to a lot more churches and to separate, really. I mean, as we know, the whole like separation between church and state, that whole like supposed logic was really just a way around taxes, and Zionism is like a very serious cult that is just so heavily ingrained in people. But I do think it's possible, though, to just start with that. Start with your neighbors, start with questioning, start with being able to reach out to some churches that might be somewhat willing to divest from the occupation. I know that, like, I believe it was I hope that this is right, that I think it was the Protestants actually that across the board that they agreed that, that, hey, like, this is not right, we shouldn't be weaponizing Jesus' name to accomplish the state, but like continuing to wake people up, but like in bigger numbers, so starting with that, because that would be a lot if a lot more leftists reached out to a few more liberals and had that patience, because I completely understand where you're coming from, Abby. Like, I was that way too. I'm very apathetic to liberals, especially because they tried to convince me to vote for genocide again. But I do think that a lot more people, especially white people, honestly, they should be talking to a lot more people in their networks. Just talk to 10 to 15 people and then tell those 10 to 15 people to talk to 10 to 15 people, like branching out that way.
I love that in theory, and I love it in practice as well, but not here. That would never work. So
don't say never. Don't say never. We're never going to. You're right. It will never work if you say
you're
it'll
right.
never work.
You're right. No, you're right. You're right. My feelings are that it would never work. My brain understands it could, but I'll tell you why I say that. You kind of likened Zionism to a cult. Well, not kind of. It is a cult. These churches that I have had experience with my whole life are themselves cults. These people view Israel as the be-all, end-all thing. The flags are in our sanctuaries. They regularly and openly and loudly pray for them. The Southern Baptist Convention adopts resolutions about this. The people, and even as an atheist, this makes me sad to say, the vast majority of people in these churches are not Christians. They do not do anything like Jesus. They follow these warped, distorted things. Now, that being said, there are some denominations where this definitely would work, but most of them have already divested. So I think, look, I've made myself less pessimistic while saying this. Instead of saying we can't do it, I think it's starting with them as neighbors. And then once we've established something there, maybe we could get a foothold in these churches that right now are just going to slam the door in our face. I think that makes more sense.
I think if Tucker Carlson can straight up say, oh, we're supposed to support the state, we're supposed to, if he can start there and say just at least that, I mean, I think there's a little bit of hope, I know it seems impossible, but you're right. We start with our neighbors. We start with branching out, telling other people, start somewhere, I know it seems very optimistic, but the more that we say never, the more that literally nothing will happen, you know what I mean? And so we have to be a little bit optimistic, and I'm sure that there's a revolutionary quote somewhere, right, about being radical, like radically believing in what it is our dreams are and living it to fruition.
Yeah, broadly speaking, on revolutionary optimism.
Yeah, and revolutionary morality. I forgot to tell y'all something there, and this was actually my second point from earlier that I forgot to. One of the things that we have been working on is, and I mean, when I say working on, we have like all these binders and all these structures, and we're going to be able to share this in autonomous space once we find out how it works. We are going to start holding public assemblies, and this way we can get people to come together in real life, in person. And these are these are assemblies. Think about stump speeches. It's kind of like that, where we get people that are already radicalized or almost radicalized or interested in being radicalized, and basically kind of lay it out for them, because there seems to be a lot of needs hand-holding. But you know what? If people need to have their hands held and be walked through this, We will stand up in front of y'all and talk and walk you through it and show that we are just regular people like y'all. We are not internet personalities or something. We are two moms that are from these hills, that live in these hills. Listen to us, please. These are the problems. Here are ideas for solutions. Would y'all like to be on board with us? Come into this, and taking it off the freaking internet and getting these people together in person. And this is probably going to start very small, but fortunately the two of us can be very dynamic speakers, and I'm hoping that catches on and helps us pull people into these, because we are going to make them a regular thing throughout this region.
Specifically as it relates to Zionism, I think we need to prioritize building relationships with anti-Zionist Jewish people with fellow Zionists, because we could give Zionists countless arguments for why it's fascist ideology, why it's an apartheid state, etc. But I think until they actually have deep, progressive conversations with anti-Zionists, we're never really going to move the needle. If anybody wants to say something about that, if not, I'll move on to something else.
No, I don't have anything to add to that. I agree.
Okay.
I agree. That's not something I have a lot of access to where I am, because this is just mostly, white Christians, but outside of regional spaces and then in other areas, yeah, I think that's very key.
So there was a phrase that I came across recently called survival of the richest, and I think that's really what's going on here. It's a play on Darwinism. So Trump's planning to phase out FEMA after this hurricane season, and I think this right here, what's happening in Houston, Texas, and more broadly across the state with the flooding related to the girls' camp, which I'll dive more into. In Houston specifically, police are forcibly removing residents that are protesting budget cuts for flooding prevention. And there was a recent poll that came out as well. 40% of Houston residents want to completely move out of the city because of extreme weather. You'll probably remember back in 2017, Hurricane Harvey was there, and it dumped about 60 inches of water on the city in just a couple of days. And Camp Mystic is a girls' camp that was recently hit with catastrophic flooding. It's a 100-year-old girls' camp. This is the part that's really interesting to me. So this camp is traditionally reserved for Texas's political elite, the daughters of them. So this adds a complete new layer of complexity to the situation. So there's a river there called I want to say the Guadalupe River. It rose 26 feet in 45 minutes, which is terrifying. So it's described as green-roofed cabins housing hundreds of campers and staff dotted the area, which is lush with cypress and live oak trees. This summer, Camp Mystic hosted 750 girls between 7 and 17 years old. That's more than half of Hunt, Texas' population of around 1,300. It's around 700 acres in the heart of Hill County, making it a peaceful place for girls to spend weeks singing campfire songs and making ceramics. And since they're right by the river in between church services, they also learn how to kayak and fish for bass. So by Saturday morning, more than 24 were still missing, and since the flood, city and state officials have been tirelessly searching for the unaccounted campers using boats, drones, and helicopters. Social media sites have been full of posts with photos of the missing girls, asking people to keep eyes out for survivors. So this story is super interesting to me for a variety of reasons, but it's like now it's impacting Texas's political elite, the people that are aggressively suppressing climate change action bills, don't believe in climate change, etc. So I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on this particular situation, and then also the response by the Houston residents as it relates to them protesting the flood prevention being cut.
Before we answer that, can you just clarify for me, did those arrests occur like at the same time as this flooding, or
Yes.
that's okay?
But two different areas. So
Okay.
one was in Houston, Texas, and another one was in a small town. But they were all related to the same storm system.
Gotcha.
This is the kind of stuff we need to actually get people to be angry and make change, because a lot of these people who think they're part of the elite, who are making these decisions, for example, in Texas, they're going to find out really quickly that they're not part of the elite, and that not only are they affected, but their children, their loved ones, and they're not going to be exempt. And so the moment they're left to their own will, I think that's what having the separate states kind of was a detriment to the US government previously, is like to their benefit now. They can just let the states go be by themselves, like figure it out on your own. And I think as people realize that it is truly affecting them, like it's their daughters at the camp, that's when it's going to start making that change. It's going to make people realize that they can also be affected. It's wild that that's what has to happen, but I mean, we're seeing it.
That's what I think too. And it just goes to show too, what is the saying? Climate change will continue to go on until you're the person that's facing it with your phone. So, like one day it'll impact you. Doesn't matter what your social status is.
Exactly. And if you're not one of the top, you know, elite, then you're not exempt from anything that's going to happen, I think.
Yeah, if you're not a billionaire that can build a bunker or fly off to space like Elon Musk, then you're SOL.
That's where we need to break up with capitalism sooner than later, because
Yes.
if he can freaking sit here and sign off public lands and just sit here and keep doing everything he's doing, letting all the water go to data centers to allow there to be more devastation to the planet, we're all screwed. Whether you're rich or not, honestly, it's gonna come find you next. So the more that we withhold our dollar, I know it seems like boycotting is like a passive move, but at the same time, it's not, because it's going to keep going. So long as people keep putting in their Amazon orders for cheap, they're going to keep just more and more. They're just going to keep doing it. I know it provides a lot of jobs, but we got to find other solutions. The more that we show them, yes, I'm willing to spend the money on whatever the hell it is you're sending me, the more that they can be able to build. I mean, even if they do build, let's say a new factory comes in, so long as people are buying the product, right, the devastation is going to keep occurring. So we got to choke it out sooner than later, because obviously, right, he's sitting here signing away, but he can sign away, but it will at least somewhat reduce the rate of devastation, at least somewhat, and we got to start somewhere. So it's, God, I
And
just
now
really
is the
wish.
time. Yeah, now is really the time. And honestly, if not for the environmental factors, we see how much it's affecting the money. And when it affects the money, that's when you actually see policy change. I mean, we saw why slavery actually ended. It wasn't because of the good of their hearts. It was to debilitate the South, financially and economically, and it worked. And so I think that's really the only way we have. And if it's going to benefit us both environmentally and politically, fantastic. I'm all for it. Tired of cheap crap. And if the rich and those 3 or 4 guys that are ruining everything, not 3 or 4, want to go ahead and go to the space, the sooner the better, so we can just like focus on what's down here. But I mean, we saw it with Starbucks, we saw it with Target, we saw it with McDonald's. There's no reason, and that's just a small percentage of the population, doing that. So
I say that they should be composted, in my opinion. I don't think we should send them to space, because that's how they would want to die. They love the thought of
the
dying
luxury.
doing their dream. Yeah, for real. Like, you know what I mean? Why would we give them that? Like,
That's
they're like, oh,
fair.
I'll be a legend. I'll be a legend. That's what they want.
I don't
No,
want the
you're
fruit
like the
from those.
rest of us. Get in
I don't
fucking
want the
line.
fruit
You're
from
gonna be
those trees,
composted.
though, Izzy. I don't know.
That's what I was going to say. I don't want to eat that poison fruit. I'm not eating
That's an
anything that
apple.
grows
Yeah.
out of them. Maybe flowers. We can put flowers on them
Yeah, that
instead.
would work.
We need to bring back the Reign of Terror.
Mm,
I think I think rich people are far too fucking comfortable.
They are.
they are. And that's why I don't think that, and I'm always sounding so pessimistic, but I'm really not. Um, I don't think that this incident in Texas is going to affect these people at all. Maybe the ones who lose children there, as in, like, the children do not survive, because they have money to fix everything. There's always a solution. If something happens to me, it is not the same thing as if it happens to somebody making, billions of dollars. They can
Mhm.
just fix it without even thinking about it. You know, and I will liken this to experiences and things I witnessed in North Carolina after Helene.
Yeah.
There, something really terrible came to the doorsteps of a lot of people here, and that gave us a huge inroad. Like, we have this saying, you've got to find the pony in the shit. The pony in the shit of Helene was that the only people that took care of each other after Helene, let me tell you, because it was not the freaking Red Cross or the government or FEMA or any of that. No, it was good churches with good people, neighbors, all the neighbor men out with all their power tools and toys and tractors and, all that. Pack mulers, mutual aid groups. That's who saved us after Helene. So these people that we need to approach and get on board with us and or radicalize. Now, I do not pretend to think that I'm going to radicalize deep North Carolina mountains Republicans to be communists. I'm not. Maybe a few along the way, but that's probably not going to be the biggest thing. But Helene let us walk our talk in such a loud way that people were like, okay, well, the government didn't help me when me and Meemaw were out here cut off from the world, but mutual aid groups got food and supplies and all to the people that were doing the pack mules, and the pack mules brought it out here. And that is where we start. And so I hate when anything tragic happens to anybody for any reason. I hate it. Like, I hate these upcoming SNAP and Medicaid cuts. But the pony in the shit is the inroad it gives you. And the discomfort, which I hate and makes my skin crawl as a human and a person, the suffering under that tends to evoke action. And so I think it's important for revolutionary optimism and morality that we remember that sometimes these horrible things that happen to us are actually opportunities for us to move forward to this better world that we all want.
That's exactly it. You took all the words like right out of my mind. The application of mutual aid, specifically
Yep.
specifically after disasters in rural areas, I think goes a long ways to, I wouldn't even necessarily say repair relationships with people you surround yourself with in your communities, but it brings people closer together. And then I think it also serves as a large source of class consciousness and solidarity.
That part right there. That's what it is. We don't use those terms, obviously. We're very careful to use just regular person to person terms, but that is exactly what it is. It is that, because they, off the bat, they want to be like, first of all, they always think we're Democrats. Ugh, the worst. They're like liberal elitists, and I'm like, you can call me anything, but you're not going to call me no damn liberal, honey. But anyway, they still see us as elitist, and we're like, no, but we live in the holler down from you. We are the same. We are working class. What theory I have read and studied, and it does not matter. I don't care about that right now. I want you to have what you need. I do not care about your political beliefs or theories. I don't care. I don't care who you voted for. And when I see people on the internet celebrating harm and wishing harm on people that voted for Trump, I feel like a feral raccoon. I
Yeah.
cannot handle that. I cannot imagine being such an awful person that's the thought you go to. What if we had thought that way, everybody that was working out here in Helene? What if we were like, oh, well, we're not helping them. They have a Trump sign. I don't care. We cannot care about that. We cannot. It has to be about class consciousness and solidarity. And that's the strong foundation here.
Even
Yeah,
if I don't like you, I should be able to fight with you or for you.
right. And I live in California, and it reminds me of Trump's weaponization of disaster aid with the wildfires. Like, oh, we're a blue state, so fuck everybody. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Appy. It's just evil, really.
It's really horrible. And I don't understand how a person arrives at that space. And unfortunately, the vast majority of people who do it are blue MAGA. Like,
I think they've done a good
hate
job of
y'all.
setting us against each other, though. I think they've done a really good job. Yeah.
They have. And we can't think like that. And don't let that sound hypocritical with what I said about how I no longer work on educating or radicalizing liberals. That's because I would be a compromise to the movement in that position now. But
Spinning
there are
your
lots of
wheels.
other people who are good at it. Right. Plus, I'm not friendly with them anymore because I don't have any patience. So intellectually, I'm on board. I'm just not the person to be doing that, which is fine because I also don't have time to be doing that. But we have people who that's their job. We call them bridges, and that they are good at that. But I have strengths with that, like in these other places, like I just mentioned after Helene.
And I think it's important to recognize that, right? Like we need to know what we're good at and what we're not good at. Because, as I like to say, there's a role in the revolution for everybody. Some people could be protesting, some people could be doing panel podcasts like this, some people could be writing on Substack, some people could be going door to door and assisting people with food programs. There's something for everybody. I think a lot of people miss that point. I think that they think that, if I'm not sabotaging infrastructure, if I'm not on the front lines, then I'm not actually doing anything.
Yes, and exactly that. We have been working on some educational or agitprop, whatever you want to call it, content that agitprop now has been ruined because people think that
Yeah,
shit posting
especially by the online left.
agitprop, that is not fucking agitprop, y'all. Anyway, don't let me go down that side road. But an actual piece that talks about exactly this, because I do think people get frozen up by that. And part of that problem is because they spend so much time looking at stuff on the internet. They're like, well, I can't be out here doing this, or I can't do this and that. But we're like, wait, but we have like 1,000 other things that you can be doing. What are you good at? What are your strengths? What would you like to do? And this is where having autonomous revolutionary spaces is so important, because you can learn these things. So, like, I'm not going out and chainsawing trees, but we have comrades who are very good at that. I'm not radicalizing liberals. And people are not sitting in my seat writing agitprop and looking like a serial killer with my whiteboard of ideas. Just we've got to communicate that. And so what we're trying to do is develop very digestible content that presents that to people, and completely to take this to a literal graphic design, visual communication standpoint that gets it away from looking like memes.
Wait,
And now we're presenting you with digestible content.
wait, are you saying that reposting memes with no critical analysis at all is not convincing anybody of anything? Is that what I'm getting?
Oh, you mean chewing up memes you pilfer from other people on the internet and then barking them back up like to a baby bird? Oh my gosh,
Particularly,
how silly of me to think.
yeah, particularly for the sole purpose of clout and monetization. I can't say that word. Monetization.
Monetization, that is a hard word. Yes, yes, that is not, in fact, agitprop. It is not.
I question a lot of intentions for those who call themselves leftists. Honestly, that unfortunately, yeah, it's been weaponized. The movement has definitely been weaponized for people's ego, for them to feel good, do it for the likes, But not to negate that memeing did make a difference somewhat amongst all the suppression, when it came especially to Palestine suppression on Instagram. So, of course, kudos to those who kept pushing and kept engaging, all that stuff. It does make a difference to some degree. I know just clicking isn't going to do much, but not to forget the whole point of we are fighting for our free speech. So there's that, and then there's, unfortunately, yes, the weaponization for likes.
Yes, I do think it had a value. It had value and a place at one time. And to some extent now, but not to the scale that we continue to see it. And now it's like we're not getting people to move past it because they're so attached to it, and that they think that's all there is. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah, I see a trend too that you guys will probably agree with about like jerking off to intellectualism. Like, oh, it's a contest about how many books I've read. rather than what I'm actually doing.
That's the perfect way to describe it. That's exactly what it is. And great. Lots of us have read lots of books. Please tell me how us sitting around debating that, like we've already done for the last 20 or 30 years, how is that accomplishing anything now? Why does this even matter? It doesn't matter. This is why we need united fronts. And to hear these people argue with brick walls and just argue these very cerebral intellectual points that most people it will just go right over their heads. And that's not a criticism of people's intelligence. It's that most people don't have the freaking energy to sit around thinking like that all day. I know I don't. But that's not helping us put food on people's table or stop arms going to Israel. It's not helping us stop these environmental disasters. It's not helping us. And then their response is, well, what are you doing? And I'm like, boy, come on now. And then they're like, well, we need, yeah, how much time do you have? Because I don't have any, because that's all I do, literally 50, 60 hours a week. But then they're like, well, we can't move forward with the revolution because we don't have a vanguard party. Bro, we're not having a freaking vanguard party. We got to move right now. But they don't want to hear it because they just want to regurgitate. Why is there all this regurgitation? Please have some original thoughts out there.
Well, I feel like people are so stuck on the most they can do is go to a protest. And I think for me, like, I understand the benefits of, it's just really difficult to keep ending up in the same freaking roads with the cops and then just a couple tourists, and everyone's off anyways because it's on a Saturday, so no one can hear you. It just really feels like it's performative, and it's definitely the state being like, see, you have some freedom, you can totally go express yourself. But that's where people are stuck in, and they think, oh, we're in America, we've got the freedom of speech, we did our part, we spoke, and that's it. But I think that's where people kind of get lost, is there's the reason that we don't hear about rioting working in other communities, other places. The reason why the rioting that happens in California is not as widely, distributed to the rest of us as news, is because if we saw that, we would start getting ideas in our heads and, potentially do the same thing. But this performative protest thing is really kind of, they duped us really well on that.
Yeah, I still shop on Amazon. I still work my 9 to 5 job, but I went to a protest on the weekend and I held a sign. I did my part.
Meanwhile, the politicians are like on their boats and yachts.
And they're laughing their asses off at us.
Yeah, they're laughing their asses off at us. I mean, that's exactly it. One of my most militant comrades, who has over 30 years experience with any major movement that you can think about, went to a couple weekends ago when there were so many, like the No Kings and all. And he was literally calling them street fairs. He was like, where's the funnel cakes? Because like, this is not a protest. And let me tell you something, that this comrade has been a guest of the state several times. This is like a legit comrade. And he's just out there like, we're so cooked. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, there's face painting and funnel cakes. Like, and then yes, it's so performative. And then I will like see videos from the global south or even from Europe. And I'm like, now see, y'all, that's a protest.
Right?
That's the way.
It's not supposed to be fucking fun.
Or permitted. Or you invite y'all, the people in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm about to call them right out by name. These people, yeah, but let me tell you, it's poisoned with neoliberalism. But yes, it is beautiful. They invited the police and then afterwards wrote them a public thank you letter. Like, are you shitting me? Are you shitting me?
Yeah, this is all liberal. Oh my God.
Ah!
All that is just liberal bull.
Here's some free coupons to come stay at our Airbnb. Like,
yikes.
Thanks for keeping us safe.
From ourselves.
Causing problems.
Just deep throating.
It's the only way. Yes. All the way down the esophagus.
On the
it's so gross.
It's coming out the other end.
Normalizers.
Yeah, literally. And the shit that comes out the other end, we're left to clean up. Thanks.
Are we screwed? We're screwed.
We're not cooked. We're fucking burnt to a crisp.
It
Ugh.
feels that way some days, man. I feel like ash some days. Like I'm just the coals left in the bottom of the burning. But
But
I
listen,
am still, I'm embering. I'm still hot though. I'm still
but if
burning.
you had a good sign that was witty and you stood out
Oh,
there and somebody else saw you and you posted your picture on Instagram, you're fine.
that is the
That's
way. I
that's
should make a brunch sign. I gotta make a brunch sign.
that's the other thing that I see in my local community with the Democrats. They go to these anti-Trump protests and then they take pictures of everybody. Like, dude, you're doing the cops work
Oh,
for them.
literally, it drives me insane. And we keep giving them, and I'm not talking about just posting blindly on the internet. I'm talking about giving people in person our voice and papers that explain how to protect yourself at protests. And, if it's going to step up or it might step up, you need to be blocked. We teach them all these things. They take their phones, they use their phones, they take pictures of everybody else, they don't cover their faces. It's like I'm talking into thin air, like
They
the
put the
teacher on the peanut.
location.
Wah, 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 wah.
They put the location and they take pictures of people's faces.
Yes. And I'm like, how? Again, y'all, I just can't wrap my brain around most of this stuff. But to me, and then they call us extreme. Like, well, that gets your attention. It gets the cops paying attention to the cops you invited. Those cops. This is calling attention to me. Great. Well, I'm still not uncovering my face. I just don't understand it.
I I don't
See,
even.
now nobody else can wrap their brain around it either. It's that absurd. This is all so illogical.
It just broke me.
I, I mean, this is the kind of thing we're up against. And I am constantly ostracized and blackballed from spaces, which I'm not in any of those spaces anymore. But in my past years, that's what happens to me in very Democrat heavy neoliberal spaces. I'm
These
always
are all
attacked.
progressives.
Yeah, I'm always
So
the villain.
called. So
Right.
called.
But if
So
that's the
called,
start of
yes.
the conversation, what are we doing still?
Here are the air quotes in the with that, these progressives. But and that, for me personally presents another challenge with working here because of Asheville's extremely heavy, and that's the largest city near us. um it's a real challenge. Yeah, inviting and thanking the police. And let me tell you, it wasn't just Democrat groups either, because our friends at PSL in Asheville do the same thing.
Uh, yep.
Well, they've always been questionable, and they just keep giving us reason after reasons, keep questioning them, You were saying earlier about those who read books. I'm like, okay, well, there's theory, and then there's action. Now, where are we gonna actually connect the dots for people to get to action without repeating the same old nonsense to make themselves feel good about themselves? We've known from the beginning, protesting is just to make yourself feel good. I mean, I know Shirin mentioned earlier, of course, to some degree, yes, in large number, it makes some difference, but for the most part, especially in DC, it's literally done only after hours when no one is around. So what are you doing exactly? Where is the action? And
Absolutely.
leftists, I think, are stuck in that's where the leftist infighting really happens. Is, oh, but Marxists said this, and the whole thing between communists
Oh,
and anarchists. Instead of working together, let's work together and get to action instead of continuously arguing about and theorizing. You know what I mean? Get to fucking work, disrupt.
Blah, 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 blah,
I
blah.
just don't
I'm
understand.
like, how do
Dial-up.
we do that? How
Why
do
can't
we
we
do
just look
that?
at our recent history? We can't look at Pride. We can't look at, the Black Panthers. There's so many examples we can take that people are just like, pretending never happened. I'm not really sure because it wasn't that
That's
long ago.
It wasn't, and that's interesting, because our front and here is modeled very heavily after EZLN and the Panthers. So we're looking at this Marxist-Leninist organization versus, a largely anarchistic organization, but that has a lot of structure. So anyway, seems to be working well how we're trying to bring that together. But this thing about arguing theory and Marx said this and da 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 da, da and oh, are you a reactionary? Or you were that? Who cares? Like, I would always come back to those arguments with, can you talk to me about your praxis And they're like, well, we haven't progressed to this state, or we don't have a vanguard part. That's exactly what I expect them to say. Like, you don't have an answer because you're not doing any praxis. And that is why I had to separate from very like Western communist heavy spaces, because every time I did any action or I needed help with something or a mutual aid project, these people were simply not showing up. Who was showing up was like ANCOMs, ANSOCs, anarchists, and then, you know, the fringe actual progressives, no air quotes. They're so close. They're almost there. Practically radical.
Yeah.
That's who is showing up. So this, you know, that ties into the meme shit posting. Like, there's a time and a place for everything, but like, and there's a time and a place for theory. But if you do not take your theory and advance it into praxis, and you're especially not doing that in the urgent times that we're in right now, you're just a poser. I'm sorry. And it's that blunt.
I can't be in these group chats anymore that just are full of leftist men. Like, they drive me crazy. I just
So
I just
awful.
I just left that one that me and Appy were in because
Yeah, we defected.
it's just such a waste of time.
Well, it's a huge waste of time. And, you know, Jordan is aware that I had a situation in there that is a situation that unfortunately a lot of women have in these leftist spaces. There is such a pervasive culture of misogyny. And there are some very gross comrades, I use that term in the absolute loosest way, who you like might think they treat you collegially and they respect you and they see that they're a comrade by your side equally, but so many of them they don't, and it ends up the connection or relationship or whatever changes, they try to cross lines, and then, you know, then it's ruined. Because for me, I'm like, well, great, they never took me seriously. They don't actually care about my work or anything I have to say, and they don't even actually care about this movement. Like, it is very tiring and frustrating. And some of them are so bad about it, they will go dipping around and messing around with your personal life because this is just a game. And they're like, if you don't play into their little clout chasing meme lord game, suddenly you're the problem. And I have spoken to dozens of women in our shared leftist spaces that have experienced this to some degree or another. It is gross.
Yeah, I mean, Appy, we were talking about the Black Panthers the other day. Even the Black Panthers, as radical as they were, dealt with huge levels of misogyny.
And they dealt with it. You know, that's the thing. They still deal with it to this day. I mean, they have physical consequences and other consequences for misogynistic behavior. And unfortunately, you know, we have a large internet circle, and then, you know, we're very spread out everywhere. So for us to bring discipline into this is a huge challenge. But it's definitely something we need to talk more about.
I think we need to bring back bullying to a degree and shame. I think
Oh
people
my
are
God, I'm so
I'm a
on
big
board with
fan of
that.
bullying bullies.
um
Yes,
people of my demographic,
Uno
straight
reverse.
white men, we are far too fucking comfortable still and need to be called out relentlessly.
Yes, and
I'm also a
you know,
fan of that. You know, if we punched Nazis, then there wouldn't be so many Nazis.
exactly. And you know, oh my God, that just made that made me laugh so hard I lost my train of thought.
Blah blah blah. It's their freedom of speech. Shut the fuck up.
Oh, no, what I wanted to say was, and I've already said this to Jordan privately, is this is something where we need men addressing other men. We
Yeah.
need men calling in, calling out. We need men not tolerating this behavior in general. But when you have a female woman, whatever, film, just comrade, and this happens to her, you need to stand up for that and you need to do something about it. And it needs to be other men doing it, because they're not listening to us call them out. It's got to come from other men.
Stop centering white feelings, and definitely stop protecting your bros for the sake of, you know, whatever it is, protecting your own identity. It's really wild how people don't realize that they're doing it. They mean well, and they take such offense to it too. They're like, "What do you mean? Like, I'm for liberating all oppressed people, and I'm doing good, and I'm." It's still the white savior thing. And whenever people get called out, it's just so crazy. It's like, are we still talking about this? Are we still really dealing with this? Like, come on.
This
It's
culture of
wild.
being resistant to taking accountability for oneself is repulsive. That's got to stop. I mean, we have to be able to directly communicate with each other. So, one thing, people have got to stop seeing unemotional direct communication as confrontation or attacks, because it's not. And then there has got to be accountability, whether we're doing it, taking accountability all on our own, or we need to be called in about something. But this over defensiveness and centering, and it'll even victim swap. It's just disgusting. We've got to stop that. We've got to take accountability, and when we get called in, we've got to accept it, learn from it, and do better.
Yeah, it's just bizarre to me that people don't understand that, because everybody that grows up in the West is constantly trying to deconstruct from colonialism and patriarchy, white supremacy, etc. So it's like you could be highly educated on those topics, you could mean well, but still make those mistakes because you're still going through that process of deprogramming. And that's endless, that's not 10, 15 years, that's your
Right.
entire life.
Yes. And that is where, there doesn't need to be a cancel culture necessarily about this. If you need to get called in about something, and it's, for example, a misogynistic behavior that's very ingrained in our culture and in our person. And so while you intellectually don't agree with it, you're still doing it, then be receptive to the call in, and let's together work on adding to your deconstruction and improving our
Are you there? You guys cut out.
And then I think that's a huge part of why these systems of oppression are gonna be very resistant to breaking, because it's gonna be a lot of dudes that haven't had to be accountable for a long time have to then become accountable, just for the same reason. The US isn't gonna acknowledge that, Israel's a colonial state, or because then they'd have to acknowledge their colonial state and so on. So I think deprogramming is going to be a very, very difficult part of the journey. And I don't think a lot of people are open to it, because I think it's very difficult work for people to realize that, they were always told that they were better than everybody because they're white or because they're rich or whatever it is. Not everyone's willing to, step back and take a look at that, unfortunately.
Yeah, the discomfort is really rough for a lot of people. And I understand that. I know it is uncomfortable. I get it, but we got to do it. We just don't have a choice.
Yeah, people need to be willing to dissolve their own egos. And people need, and again, these are difficult conversations to have, particularly with yourself, right? Like nobody wants to have their worldview systematically desecrated and have an understanding that everything that you believe and have been taught is incorrect. Like that's not comfortable for anybody, but it's highly necessary in order to have a sort of world that we're looking for, or even something remotely close to what that resembles.
I think that for a lot of people, that is a type of betrayal trauma. I think I see a lot of responses to, people waking up and realizing they've always been lied to, they've been deceived, they've been brainwashed, that they kind of react and respond to that in the same way a person might betray them. So I think something we can do to help us with that is approaching it with that kind of trauma informed mindset. Look at it like a betrayal trauma. And I think that will help the person experiencing it process it, and also give us better inroads um, to working with them and radicalizing them further.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of like a bell hooks approach to things, like approaching things with love and kindness and and coming at people from where they're at and not intellectual domination or condescension or anything related to that.
That's that's perfect. I recently myself, over probably the last 3 months, recognized that I needed to be more palatable if I was going to do this work where I do it. And that there were plenty of other people to be angry and aggressive and loud. Now, I'm still aggressive and loud, and sometimes I'm angry, but I've really worked to let that go, because the reality is I do need to be more palatable, because if people are not receptive to me, I'm just another one of these bozo brains yelling at a brick wall. And I'm not going to get anywhere like that. So I think it is very key that we center, like a lot of people post quotes and stuff about revolutionary love, but that's got to be a real concrete concept. And we have to operate from there, because, and it took a lot for me to get here and get out of my own cerebral head.
Hmm.
And the discomfort of the intimacy of that was an enormous personal challenge. But it is truly the only way. I know that almost sounds cliche, but it just is what it is.
Yeah, and I think that more of us need to recognize that you can channel anger productively. You can channel it into radicalization, and also, of course, there's going to be a degree of despair and depression. We all deal with it. The world is full of suffering, and we feel for people, but not letting despair ultimately overcome any of your feelings to where it just completely removes you from the movement and fighting for what you're ultimately seeking.
That's why that net is so important, because we need to, as much as we can, and when appropriate, keep that anger and rage that fuels us out of the public space. Meaning we need to give each other more solidarity as a part of this movement. And, those of us that really do a lot of work on the ground, I mean, the burnout is unreal. And so having each other to go to for that. And I've been very lucky to have that myself, but everybody needs that.
Yeah, like I always feel better after having these conversations, no matter how dark the topics are.
Oh, yeah, for sure. A lot of times just hearing somebody else thinks and feels like you do, like it just makes all the difference. I mean, you Jordan, this would, like, I might rage vent something to you or vice versa, and then like that's all that needed to happen. I don't need to be nasty to other people or like publicly crash out about it or something, but I just needed to get it out and have somebody be like, oh yeah, man, I feel that too. And like I instantly feel so much better. Like it doesn't solve the problem, but I feel better. So I can keep working.
Yeah, I think emotional validation goes a long ways. Anything else you guys want to end with? I'm about ready to end the panel.
I don't think so.
Okay. Does anybody have anything that they want to plug? Something that they're working on, an organization to check out, etc.?
Yes, I do. We have this new front. We have been soft launching this week. It's called SALT Front. Salt, like the stuff you shake on your food.
Mhm.
It stands for Southern Appalachia Liberation and Transformation. So it's SALT Front. This is a militant united front that covers a pretty large region of Southern Appalachia. So we are on Instagram at SALT Front. And our soft launch has gone really well. We've been very, very pleased with the response, and we're going to start ramping that up coming this week. So I would encourage everybody to check it out. Even if you're not from the area, we love the support. We love the solidarity.
Thank you. I just gave you a follow, by the way.
If I may as well, Freedom Hour Iran, obviously, radio every week. We're veering away from Spotify, so we'll see how that goes. But if you guys are also interested in any other groups that are very collective, anti-fascist, anti-imperialism, anti-Zionist groups, I've recently been talking a lot with a group called Baham Liberation. It's BAHAM, and it's really nice to just have another space of Iranians who are speaking about, very leftist, very collective liberative theories in action. So those are great ones to check out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I could just plug two organizations that are still doing work for Gazans on the ground, the Children's Future.org and Ramon Foundation. They're able to get clean water and food. They're still rationing. Obviously, things are still like literally 1,000 times the rate. But they're able to feed people with what they do have still there. So those are two foundations that you can check out, the childrensfuture.org and ramonfoundation.org, RAMMUN. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of your day. I'm going to head to bed. It's about 12:30 here in Romania, so I'm getting tired.
Thank y'all.
Thank you guys
Thank you
so much.
so much. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Bye.